Hi, I'm Dr. Christy Clark from Third Wave Therapy and Training. I hired Jenny B to design my website because I was restarting my practice with a new emphasis on consultation and training in addition to therapy. I really wanted a professional, polished vibe in addition to getting across that I provide a serious healthcare service. Jenny was able to strike this balance so effectively with the branding and feel of the site. What I appreciated most about working with Jenny is that she held my hand through the process, and since she is the expert, it took the guesswork out of it for me. I have already had traffic on my site and so much positive feedback. People are spending time there too, which is such a great sign, and I just launched, but I've already had a couple of referrals from it. If you're looking for a website that does more than just look good, one that actually converts visitors into clients, I highly recommend working with Jenny B. She'll help you create a website that works as hard as you do.
When was the last time you encountered a website and when you landed there, you felt overwhelmed because there was just too much stuff crammed onto the page? I'm sure you can picture what I'm talking about. There's text everywhere, so much copy, buttons all over the place. There's zero breathing room. You kind of feel a little bit stifled. Today, I want to talk about why giving your website content some space, some white space, might be the key to getting more clients. I see this all the time with business owners. We tend to think that every bit of white space needs to be filled with information. We all think more is better. We want to share as much as we can with our visitors. But actually, that's not the case. I've learned after designing hundreds and hundreds of websites that giving your content room to breathe isn't just about looking nice. It's actually more about helping people take action on your site. Today, I'm going to talk about how to use white space on your website to make it easier for visitors to read, understand, and take action. Because, like I always say, less is really more when it comes to your website. Welcome to Website Design Made Simple, the podcast for busy small business owners who want a high-performing website that converts and sells their offers, even while they're sleeping. Because you deserve to have a strategic and beautiful website that truly represents your brand and positions you as the expert that you are. I'm your host, Jenny B, web designer and creative director at Jenny B Designs, where we believe that your website is the one thing that makes you sales and builds your brand at the same time. Ready to say goodbye to a website that you're embarrassed to share? And hello to a money-making, personality-packed powerhouse? Let's head into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy that you joined me today. If we haven't already met, my name is Jenny B. I own Jenny B Designs. We're a brand and web design studio. My passion is helping small business owners just like you design beautiful websites that attract your ideal client and make you money. Because if your website isn't making you money, it's not working for you. Today's topic is all about white space. And if you thought I couldn't create an entire podcast episode about white space, you were wrong, because I can. It's just so important. And what does white space really mean? It's not just about empty white areas all over your website. It's more about creating that intentional breathing room around all of your content. You can think of that white space as like pauses in a conversation, pauses on this podcast. And without pauses, you just have noise. You just have me talking on and on and on and on and never stopping. And the same goes for your website. With pauses, with stops, you have more clarity. When I design a website for my small business clients, we use white space to create clear pathways for the visitors to follow for the customer journey. White space in practice is about the space between the navigation items up at the top of your website so that each singular option stands out. It's the breathing room around your headlines to make them pop. It's the margin on either side of your content that creates a frame like artwork. It's the sections. It's the padding between those sections to create natural breaks. And room around the buttons so that they really demand attention. They call people over. Those are the calls to action. I recently did a website audit, and she had so much information on her homepage. There was no white space. And she found that people were actually coming to her confused and not entirely understanding what services she had to offer, despite the fact that she had everything laid out on her website. Well, the solution to that is perhaps we take a little bit away. recreate some more white space. And so that when someone gets to her website, they're not overwhelmed or bombarded. They have that breathing room. And when they do, they're able to absorb what's left on the page that much better. It's the comprehension piece. Visitors can absorb what you're saying. They can focus on what matters. And this carries over to your mobile. And this is really big because a lot of people, of course, visit your website on their phones. And that strategic white space ensures that your content is actually readable and that your buttons are clickable on that device. And then finally, it pertains to that visual hierarchy. The white space helps your visitors understand what's the most important piece of your page. We use a lot more spacing up at the hero section when someone lands there with the primary headline. And of course, we're guiding people down the page through your content in the right order. So let's use some practical examples for where you can use this white space on your website. The first one that I touched on is your navigation. That navigation is one of the most important pieces of your website, and it needs breathing room between the items. And it just isn't about aesthetics because, yes, it makes people feel more comfortable and settled when you have some spacing up at that navigation, but it makes each option more clear and more clickable. And I always say limit your menu, your navigation to 5 items or less. Less is more. And when you do that, coupled with a little bit of white space around it, it makes those buttons, those navigation items stand out. The second place for implementing this is in your headlines and in your copy. Around your headlines, make sure you have enough spacing so that they stand out and grab the attention of your visitors. A lot of people actually just skim a web page. They don't read every single word. Ensuring that each headline has enough spacing around it and it stands out will make someone easier to comprehend what's going on that page if they just read the headlines. And then for the body text, which is underneath those headlines, making sure that there's proper line height, which, side note, if you don't want one line height spacing, you probably want to do 1.4, give it a little bit of breathing room, and paragraph spacing, and make sure content actually get read instead of skimmed. When you just have a single line for your body content, it tends to chunk up, and people just see a huge block of copy and they don't read it. But when you leave a little bit of room in your body text between each line, people are more likely to read it. It is more pleasing to the eye and therefore easier to digest. Of course, there's always your call to action buttons. This is another space where white space is critical. Your CTAs, they need the breathing room to stand out. They're actually probably the star of your website, right? They need to be seen. They're the calls to action, what we want people to do. They need breathing room to stand out and call people in. And then, of course, they're your forms. Forms, I see sometimes people neglect to add white space around there. They just pop the forms in and call it a day. But I like to have a contact form that isn't full width, meaning it doesn't go across your entire web page. It's actually skinnier, and you have some white space on either side. That makes people see the form a little bit better. It's a little bit more condensed, and it has proper spacing and room. And then at the bottom, the button to submit, making sure that it too has enough space and it commands that attention. That's a really good place to add some white space. Why is that rhyming? Into your website. And then, of course, the content sections, between the different sections of your pages, that white space above and below each content section. Like, when I say chunk out your website, that's what I mean. But making sure that you have space above and below these content sections is really important for the eye. I'm going to give you some, measurements. If you're doing your own website, I'm going to talk about some pixels. I'm going to give you some exact spacing that you can think about adding to your website if you're doing this yourself. And this is over your head, then just listen along and don't do anything with this information. But if you want to get granular, I want to give it to you so that you know what you can do. When it comes to your headers, those that we want to stand out, I like to see 60 or 80 pixels above and below. For the paragraphs, the body text, I like to see 20 to 30 pixels between those. We want to make sure and we want to avoid having a wall of text. There needs to be breathing room on either side of the paragraphs. And then on the sections, this is really where it really matters. the chunks, when I say chunk out your website, above and below those chunks, I typically like to see 150 pixels above and below. That's large. That's a lot of spacing. And sometimes people might look at that and say, "Oh, that looks like a lot." But trust me, it's not. You want to break up this experience. So as someone is scrolling, because we all scroll down the page, as someone is scrolling down, you want them to really be able to digest the first section before they get into the second section. And giving them that breathing room allows them to do just that. And then finally for the buttons, I would say, 40 to 50 pixels of clear space around all sides. That just means don't just drop a button directly below your paragraph. Leave a little bit of room. You want a little bit of spacing. And then, of course, when you're on your mobile, you want to reduce some of that spacing. When I design on desktop and then I design on mobile. And what I do is I take the desktop version, pull it over to mobile, and then see what I need to do to reduce, to remove. I remove some of the images because when someone's on their phone, they're not there for the enjoyment factor. They're there to get information and make it happen. I remove some of the images, but I also reduce the spacing, probably about 40 or so % for mobile. Just taking down that white space because people on the mobile phones don't want to be scrolling through white space as much as they do on desktop. And making sure that when I see any copy, that it's at a good readable length, a line length, that nothing is going over too far, that everything is balanced. And look on different devices. You can check. And actually, if you open up your website in any browser and you right click, you can hit inspect. And when you do that, you're taken to a screen that has lots of code and all kinds of things. But up at the top of the page, it has some little pictures. And you can use this to see how your website will look on desktop, on mobile, on iPads and things like that, on different devices. Take a peek and look and see what looks best. And if you have to add more white space or you have to remove some white space. But making sure that you're consistent throughout the user experience on whatever device that they are on. Some mistakes that I see a lot is inconsistent spacing between sections. And this happens a lot on desktop. If you are spacing something with 150 pixels above and below a section, or whatever you want to use, whatever metric you decide to use, if you're using percentage or whatever option that your website builder gives you, just make sure you're doing it in every single section. You want to be consistent. I also see a lot cramped navigation. And this a lot of times people don't even think about because maybe they're using a template or maybe they're just creating something themselves and the system set up the navigation and it's just, you're just thinking about what pages should I be adding to the navigation. I want you to look at the design and see, is there enough white space? Maybe you should be adding some more in between those items. And finally, the last place I usually see people go wrong is too little spacing between those text blocks, those paragraphs. It's just too much copy, too many chunks of text and not enough space between them. White space isn't, about following the exact measurements. I know I gave you some specific measurements that you can use, but it's more about creating this purposeful breathing room that truly guides your visitors towards the action that you want them to take. I want to share a little story, and this probably pertains to about 80% of my website rebuilds. Someone comes to me with a website that they either had professionally designed a while ago or they did themselves. And we come up with a new design based on their branding and their new content, the new services or their updated services, however they want to showcase themselves online. I will say for most projects, a lot of times, because my style is very modern and clean, we are designing a website that firstly adds so much more white space than they had before. And second, is designed with purpose. Everything has a purpose behind it. And you can see a lot of my before and afters in my case studies. Before is there was a lot of information crammed onto the page, and there wasn't that clean, gentle feel to it. There's just a feeling that you get when you go to a website that has enough white space. And for all of my designs, I would say that one of the top things that I do is add white space and remove what doesn't need to be there. Those are the two things that I focus on when I design for my clients. So what can you do? Looking at your website right now, let's talk about some action steps. Look at your content. Look at your homepage. Does your content have enough room to breathe? Are your calls to action, your buttons standing out? Is your spacing consistent through all the pages? Or do you have some nice spacing on the home page, but the about page is just kind of garbled together and it's too close and it doesn't have spacing? Look at your home page, make adjustments. Look at your navigation, make adjustments. And see. Think about what purposeful space that you can add to the website that helps guide your visitors to take the action. And if you feel like you would like an expert eyes on your website spacing or just your overall strategy, I would love to help. I have a website audit where we can look at your site together and I will identify exactly what's working and what needs adjustment, including your white space strategy. Just head over to the show notes for more information about that audit. And just remember, sometimes the most powerful improvements come from what you take away and not what you add. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. And that wraps up another episode of Website Design Made Simple. I hope you found the insights shared in this episode valuable and takes you one step closer to creating a website that attracts more of your ideal clients and builds your brand. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. Your review will help us reach more small business owners like you who are ready to make more money with their website. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.